down to Dinosaur Avenue, and then I'll roar it higher. Roar, 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 roar. I'm going to roar down to Dinosaur Avenue, and then I'll roar it higher. Bum, 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 bum. Oh, yo. Oh, 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 no. Oh, 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 no. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh. Whoa. Whoa. Do you like dinosaurs? I like dinosaurs. They're not my most favorite thing in the world, but I think it goes without being said that if anybody had the opportunity to see a dinosaur live, we would take it. What if I told you that there is a way? Unfortunately, we do not live in Jurassic Park, so don't go getting Jeff Goldblum out of neck. And as of right now, I cannot bring one back from the dead, but while we cannot bring back one practically, I have found a way, my friends, to bring them back artistically. Let me tell you, getting to watch these big, beautiful dinosaurs roar back to life in this puppeteered play being put on by my local arts college, and it's not a local production; it's a national production, but it was being hosted by a local fine arts college. It was quite the treat. It was quite the treat. Just not in the way that you might think. So it was a Friday afternoon when my doorstep was graced with the Florida Fine Arts pamphlet, which detailed all of the student and professional fine arts that were going down in my hometown. And as I flipped through, my eyes, like a true intellectual, fell on the one play that piqued my interest. Could you guess what that was? It was Dinosaur World Live. And it was, now the astute listener might have come to a conclusion already that when you're looking into a pamphlet that has a bunch of plays, among all of the Greek tragedies and epic romances, a play about dinosaurs might be a bit of an outlier. However, hindsight is 2020, and after reviewing the price of the tickets and gathering some of my friends and hyping up the expectation, I sat and wait for about 3 months until February 12th, where I was finally graced with the viewing pleasure that is DWL. The day was here, and me and my friends all loaded up in the back of my Dodge Dart, hoping to catch us a glance of those big, beautiful lizards. Now, tell you what, maybe I should have done some critical thinking. Maybe I should have thought about the targeted audience of a play about dinosaurs. However, wouldn't you know it, that I was under the impression that there would be plenty of adults who had a passing interest or even a professional interest in dinosaurs. Granted, those people are called paleontologists, but who knows? I was a casual dino enjoyer. There could be other casual dino enjoyers out there. So, I was pretty hopeful. Matter of fact, I wasn't hopeful at all. I didn't think anything. I had made a mistake. One, the magnitude of which was not fully realized until all of my adult friends were marching headfirst into what appeared to be a mass of 10-year-old children, the likes of which would have put Barney to fucking shame. Now, the realization of my hubris hit all of us almost simultaneously. The sigh that we let out of our mouths only blackened our simmering disappointment. None of us were there to cause a ruckus or to be nuisances or anything. On the contrary, we were there to watch the show. We were very interested in it. But we all stood out like a youth pastor at an AA meeting. Nobody said that we couldn't come, but everybody is wondering, why the fuck are we there? What was running through my mind is, how many 10-year-olds can you and all of your friends take on? If there was ever a time and place for me to test that theory, it would have been right then and there. I'm kidding, obviously I'm kidding. But as we pulled into the parking lot, I was in fact met with the armies of the Norse of children, which did kind of set the stage, no pun intended, for what the rest of the play was going to play out as, no pun intended. As we made our way inside, I was disappointed once again with the fact that there were, in fact, no concessions. Now, giving popcorn and candy to a bunch of children who are about to go scream at dinosaurs might not be the best idea. Could even be a recipe for disaster, but hell, what the hell do I know? All right, I'm a popcorn man. I love my popcorn.
But as we made our way to our seats, my realization that my own personal hell was coming to fruition it only got deeper and deeper. We were up on the highest bit of the pavilion. This was a pretty big amphitheater, at least from my recollection of how it looked. We were up at the toppest bit, but there were 2 other platform rows that sunk under the seats that we were on below us. That being like the very first row that sat like right on the stage, and then there was the row above it, and then we were finally on the third, the highest row up. But at the time, I did not know that this was going to become such a memorable experience. I did not go to this play for content or to I did this just because I was so genuinely curious on what getting to see dinosaurs puppeteered in real life. But if it wasn't already obvious, it became apparently clear what was in store for us as the show began. The overrailing thunder that erupted in the amphitheater with a deafening screech would have woken up the dead. And what it did wake up was a primal fear inside of me. I think that it's like a biological thing for humans to have a fear of a mass amount or even one child screaming. It's one thing, because I've been to plenty of concerts and places and where loud and everybody screaming and roaring. I've even been in groups, but I've never been in a state where a group of individuals, a group of children was screaming that put me on edge like that. But the conductor of our play was named Miranda, and she was acting as the head paleontologist. She was going to be leading her troupe, us, the audience, in a wild, fantastical escapade of dinosaur shenanigans. At this point, everybody in my group kind of had a pretty good grip on what the play was going to be. And while none of them said anything to one another, I did feel this strong connection that we were all going to lock in and see if we couldn't just suffer through what this play was going to be. And of course, admittedly, they started really big. The first dinosaur that they brought out was at least 3 times the size of Miss Miranda and was incredibly impressive puppetry. It's quite upsetting to think about and to reminisce about this because it makes me think about, what made me want to go to it in the first place. I don't know why it didn't compute to me that this was going to be a child's event. Maybe it was the fact that I was just excited to see something that had been long extinct, or maybe the mystery of Edwin Drood just didn't really strike my fancy. But by the time that the first dinosaur came out, we got to see the show's formula. Miranda would bring out a dinosaur and show them around, in which time a small problem would occur. This problem would allow Miranda and the puppeteers to show off the puppetry. Maybe the dino would get hungry, or it would need to complete an activity. But I can't remember the name of the first dinosaur, but I do remember the name of the second dinosaur. A little foreshadowing there. It was a microraptor by the name of Orlando. And that word Orlando will live in my flippin' dreams as long as I have to live on this godforsaken peninsula. Once the big O hit the stage, he was moving and schmoving and needed to be puppeteered by 3 different puppeteers, one of which held the left wing, the other one held the right wing, and then the last puppeteer controlled the body and the head. After flying around a bit, O-Dog came and sat down on a pedestal next to Miranda, and this is where he was introduced to the crowd for the first time. And oh baby, it was love at first sight. Yet, to my dismay, I wasn't the only one who fell in love with Orlando. For some godforsaken reason, this blue rat captivated the audience of 10-year-olds. Real quick before I go any further, I think it's funny to actually talk about how Orlando was puppeteered. Like I said, he had 3 different puppeteers, and I assume because of his complex movement, he had to have that many people commanding him. And I'm not here to hate by any means, certainly not. I'll talk later on in the video about how I actually feel about the acting and the puppetry, and it's obviously all very impressive, etc. However, watching 3 grown men dressed in all black chasing around a blue bird, because that's how they did it, and I'll talk a little bit about how with the Velociraptor later on as well, is they were dressed in all black, and in front of them, they basically had Orlando in their hands, and they would run around with Orlando. But watching grown men dressed in all black chasing around a blue bird reminded me of college in a way that I just did not enjoy the taste of. But anyways, let's introduce one of the major through lines of the whole play that played a major part in Orlando's $1 Million Master Plan. I'm sure many of you have seen children's television, both as a child observer or a child participator or as an adult observer. But it goes without being said that children's television loves interactable content. Its parasocial nature allows the viewer to interact with something that would otherwise kind of just be one-sided. So if I was a 10-year-old here, I think that I would have been having a fucking blast. But I wasn't 10. I was 22. And moreover, I had just drugged 3 of my 22-year-old friends to this fucking travesty. And on Orlando, making his second pass to the backstage and heading out, the egg began to rock. And I felt the weight of this precipice. What would come next could only be described as an Orlando Magic fan being stabbed to death as he watched them win the national championship. The child behind me, bless his heart, proceeded to lean down right to my ear. I mean, I'm not kidding, inches away from my ear, and let out the most blood-curdling Orlando I have ever heard. I believe that the child mixed up the word Orlando and Miranda, but whatever the case was, he was going to use that word for the next hour and a half that we were there. And to add insult to injury, the egg rocked 3 more times before the next dinosaur was even brought out. Orlando! 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 I can still hear it. I could still hear it. It's still there. I don't think I can ever root for one of my most favorite basketball teams ever again. But moving on from the Big O, I think it would be funny to mention something that at the end of every dinosaur, Orlando included, which God forbid if that one kid got to get brought up there, I think he would have torn the fucking head of the bird off. But moving on from the Big O, there was a bit at the end of every dinosaur where they would bring up a child from the front row. Now, obviously, the fact that you had to be on the front row was lost on many of the children in the audience. So anytime the opportunity arose, kids from all over the amphitheater were doing anything they could to get on stage. One child of whom had his dreams crushed by his father when his father leaned over and told him, and they were like right close to us. He said to him, "You will never get picked when you're this high up." Now, obviously, the father was talking in practical means. However, for some reason, that line stuck with me like some type of age-old wisdom that I had just yet to reach. I also want to mention here something that's kind of heartwarming, and it also goes to show, I mean, how many times these puppeteers and people have done this show, and second, just the professionalism of all of the actors and actresses that are on board. But the first dinosaur that they brought up was one of the bigger dinosaurs, and the first little girl that they brought up started to get overwhelmed, at the end of her bit, because she was like I think she was supposed to feed the dinosaur a tree, and I think she just got a little overwhelmed. But what was very heartwarming was the way that they combated this. Instead of just like shoving the little girl off the stage into her parents, Miranda like had the dinosaur lay their head down, because how the dinosaur was being puppeted is the puppeteer has to reach up basically behind the dinosaur and like hide his hand behind the head of the dinosaur, because it's the audience is right facing, so he's hiding behind the left side of the dinosaur. Dino, I'm sorry, I'm gonna say that name 1850 times. But Miranda had him put his hand down and rest the dinosaur head on the floor and kind of like poke his head out and like wave at her. And she said, "Oh, see, dinosaurs are really just people," which was just such a cute little way for them to handle that. And that really calmed the little girl down, because the guy, he was able to, I'm sure, like he like pulled in like, "Hi, hello," and like how cool is that? Like that's so adorable to for them to go off, go off, sis. I never want to be trapped in a room with 1,000 children. I think it's It goes without being said that this is obviously a child's kingdom. We were out of our depth of water here, so getting to actually see kids enjoy the film and the play in a heartwarming way, it does warm my heart. Okay, I'm not a fucking Grinch. I just, hate having to hear Orlando! But nevertheless, the bit ended, and the third dinosaur that we got to see was a baby Triceratops. Now, admittedly, I was a little disappointed. By this point, they had brought out, a few smaller dinosaurs, and I was kind of hoping that the big dinosaurs were going to come and make a ruckus. It's easy to say that amongst the chaos, I was hoping that my main man, T-Rex, was going to steal the show, but have no fear. Despite being disappointed by the baby Triceratops, I was pleasantly surprised that Mama Trio made her way onto the scene and was mighty impressive. It was a treat getting to see the scale of these puppets. The Mama Trio was at least 3 times bigger than the Puppeteers, and I think it's only right for me to say that despite the fact that it seems like I might have been hating on the play up to this point, which I've effortlessly, or with so much effort to try to make it not seem like that, I should stop and say that the play was objectively awesome. The dinosaurs were super cool, and the acting was super cool, and they all looked really realistic. It's just the fact of me being there in that environment was a lot. It was a lot, and despite the fact of it being really cool, it was 100% a child's thing, and so nevertheless, despite the fact of the play being very impressive, it was at that point, right after the Mama Dino or the Mama Trio and the Baby Trio go away, they bring out another dinosaur, which at this point I was like, bring out the T-Rex, bring out the T-Rex. They brought out a Velociraptor, which again was a smaller puppet, still impressive puppetry, but I knew that it was going to probably be another 30, 40 minutes, so I began to have second thoughts about staying the entire time. I did mention that despite the fact that Orlando was on his plane back home, the little man behind me had not forgotten about his favorite word. Not only did I begin to regret my decisions, but I began to actively look for a way to nip this shit in the bud. And funny enough, that sentiment was shared with all of my 20-year-old, 21 and 22-year-old friends that I had drugged to come and see this play. So I leaned over to them and informed them that it might be in our best interest to just go ahead and head out. And after some short but very understanding looks, we went ahead and made our move. Now listen, folks, I have never had to awkwardly shuffle out of anything before when it comes to live theater. I've never left a theater early. I've never left a concert early. I've never left a play early. Shit, I've never even left a comedian set early, even if he wasn't the person that I wasn't there to see. So this walk of shame shuffle that me and my friends had to do, all 4 of my adult friends had to do out of a child's television play, was to say humbling, to say the least. To add insult to injury on top of that, and I can only say that we felt really bad about this, but at the end of it, I mean, they won. But the family that we sat in front of, the little kids who sat behind us, were complaining the entire time about how they couldn't really see because they had 4 grown adults sitting in front of them. And I mean, all of us were like desperately like slouching in our chairs, like trying to. And so when we left, we kind of knew, or I kind of knew that, maybe the parents of those kids either felt one or two ways. One, they might have felt bad that, they might have been the reason that we had like up and left, because the kids were complaining the entire time that we were there. And we tried, we tried to, and the parents weren't being rude about it or anything. Like, they were like, hey, this is the way that it is, honey. I'll have to sit you on my lap or this. And we didn't like it. Like, we felt bad. And like, the thing was, it wasn't even something where we could be like, oh, would you like to switch our seats? Because I thought about that. So it was either that they felt bad that they might have forced us to leave, or they thought that maybe they had like won or something by kind of like bullying us to like leave in some type of way, because the kids were constantly saying that they couldn't see, which was not the case. Now, I will never let my pride ever be dismayed in public by a stranger. So back to what I was getting at, almost like some sense of karma as we walked out, the attendant said to us, they asked, was it too scary? I informed him that it was fucking horrifying and promptly left, but it was an experience. It was an experience. I'll say that. I enjoy good acting. However, being stuck in an echo chamber with hundreds of screaming children legitimately is my personal hell. But listen, let's make one thing clear. The play itself was spectacular. I think that the puppeteers did an amazing job. The dinosaurs were super duper realistic. And the play is a 10-year-old's wonderland. All of the dinosaurs were very interesting to see. And it was 100%, 110% my fault that I had dragged 4 adults. Orlando! See, I wanted to get you right there. See, that's how I felt. Did I get you? Yeah? But it was my fault that I had dragged 4 adults to be a nuisance at this poor damn play. But to wrap things up, I want to say a few things, that being of which, if you have children and you notice at Dinosaur World Live, I think they're doing like a Midwest tour right now, because I know they're finishing up their Florida tour. I believe that's how that's working, because I heard that next they're going to some places in Texas. So I could be completely wrong about that, but if I am, I'm sorry. But just look up Dinosaur World Live. But if you have kids, or you just really, really love dinosaurs, then I recommend maybe giving it a shot and checking it out, especially if you have kids. This is a 10-year-old dino lover's dream, and at a moderately affordable price. I think that for down here in Florida, it was only $15 for kids under 10, $20 for adults, and then $12 for anybody with a student ID. Granted, the seats that we were in were the highest up seats when we were looking, and thank God, because I think there was a small discussion about getting more pricier seats. But the seats that we were in were the highest seats up that we could get. And of course, being that high up will and does remove some of the scale of the dinosaurs. But I mean, nevertheless, even if you have 3 kids and your spouse, 3 kids under 10, that's $45, and then you got another 40 with you and your spouse. For about $85, you can go and show your kids dinosaurs. So, it was reasonably affordable. And the last thing that I'll say is, it is truly, and I know it seems like I've been hating on it, it truly is an incredibly awesome play. It's very impressive. Miranda, the conductor of the play, is a, and I do not mean this because when people say this, they, kind of feels discredited, but she's a natural born children's entertainer. You have to have a certain level of energy and be able to conduct that energy in a certain type of way in order to be a child's entertainer. And then working with dinosaurs and kind of having like that little moment where Miranda knew to snap and to kind of like come down, and how quickly the puppeteers interact, and not even really showing anything to the audience, but was able to break the fourth wall with just that one child. I mean, that just shows the level of professionalism that they have within the craft. So I cannot stress to you enough that Dinosaur World Live is a really cool play. I just so happen to create my own personal hell, which is par for the course for me, to be honest. But that's that. That was my experience at Dinosaur World Live. Obviously, it wasn't the most fantastical story in the world. It was just me going to a play in which I wound up being surrounded by an auditorium of screaming children, which was certainly disappointing. But I thought it was at least somewhat worth sharing, considering it was such a devastating experience. And also, I want to talk a little bit about Dinosaur World Live. While although this is 100% more of a review of my experience, not a review of the play. But like I said, if you have a chance to go check out Dinosaur World Live, you have kids, or you're just a huge dinosaur enjoyer, go and do it. I think you'd be interested in it. But I hope you enjoyed sitting there and listening to me ramble for a little bit. I'll talk briefly here, even though that I'm already kind of running over time. I'll talk briefly because I hope this is going to be the video with some minor editing that I post. I'll talk, just that. I'm still here. I'm still doing this. This is only my second video, But this type of format, while it's not going to be one that I want to be long, or something like I would love to add more production value as time goes on. This is, I'm trying to figure myself out, and I'm finding ways to do something with the content that life has given me. At a certain point, I can only go so far when it comes to really getting to produce content that I have, because I would love to do things that I would call my magnum opus right now. I have ideas of what like these great videos would be, but unfortunately, not only have life not provided me the time, but it's definitely not provided me the monetary value to be able to do that stuff right now. But that's okay. That's fine, because I want to do and make whatever content I can out of what life gives me. And if that's, kind of talking about a funny little story that happened to me and my friends, even though if it's not the most interesting and it's kind of drab, kind of, slow, I'll get better at it. And hopefully the experiences that I do have, I'll get better at describing, and I can make more out of that. But obviously, this is just me rambling. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And as always, we are Mr. Podigy, me and you. So I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.